Let's bring in Mark Bichachi on this, but with the context of what happened on Monday, and I'd like us to play that story that was done by Olive Burrows. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, on Monday, the first day of the members' induction, that one of his first acts in his official capacity has been to champion their cause with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Wetangula assured MPs that the perks enjoyed by the 12th Parliament would extend to them, including the sitting allowance for plenary sessions, which the SRC abolished in July. Wetangula gave the assurance of the official opening of an induction retreat for members of the National Assembly. Now here's that report.
I heard you express anger when my dear lady, our clerk, mentioned the SRC.
The emoluments and perks enjoyed by members of Parliament was top of the agenda as the 13th Parliament checked into a city hotel for an education on what would be expected of them. In setting the tone for the induction exercise, National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula spent a significant portion of his 20-minute speech on the subject of car loans, mortgages and allowances.
Find our staff. They'll show you how to get your mortgage, how to get your car.
Wetangula informing the legislators that one of his first orders of business as Speaker was to take up cudgels on their behalf with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission in response to the abolishing of sitting allowances for plenary sessions.
We live incrementally. We don't live by reduction. Nobody in their right frame of mind will interfere with your car allowances, with your mileage reimbursements, and with your mortgage and everything else that you have been having, because that is your entitlement.
A motion likely to receive bipartisan support.
Members, we can assure you that nothing will change, and if anything changes, it will not be substantial. And we have advised SRC that they are not frustrators but facilitators of members of Parliament to do their work well.
On July the 27th, the SRC gazetted reviewed remuneration and benefits for state officers for the period covering 2021 to 2025. Notably, where MPs are concerned, they abolished sitting allowances for plenary sessions but increased their pay by between 134,000 and 214,000 shillings in salary market adjustments.
A member of Parliament in your constituency, you are a funeral undertaker, you are a midwife, you are an extension officer in farming, you are a vet, you are a counselor on social issues. You literally do everything. And above all, you are also the local ATM. So my leadership will ensure that we facilitate you to discharge some of these unexpected demands from the public.
Should the review terms hold, your Member of Parliament will take home a gross salary of 710,000 shillings minimum, including a house allowance of 250,000 shillings. Not to mention that they're entitled to a mortgage of up to 35 million shillings.
Take your mortgage now as the cheapest mortgage on the market. I think it's 2-3% interest.
They will also receive at the very minimum 7,500 shillings per committee sitting, up to a maximum of 120,000 shillings per month. MPs are also entitled to a car loan of up to 8 million shillings at an interest rate of 3% per annum. This includes a car maintenance allowance of 356,525 per month and mileage of up to 353,778 shillings monthly. MPs also enjoy medical cover not only for themselves but a spouse and up to 5 children below the ages of 25, with an inpatient cover of 10 million shillings, not to mention dental and optical cover. Among the changes gazetted by the SRC is that it and not the Parliamentary Service Commission will set the daily subsistence allowance MPs receive for local and foreign trips. Simply put, per diem. Despite the SRC having stated it was ready to take on MPs over the sitting allowance, which will save the taxpayer R1 billion annually, the remarks made by Wetangula indicate that the SRC may have already been prevailed upon.
I've invited the chair. She will be here, but she will come after I have made the communications I have told you.
Olive Burrows, NTV.
Mark Bichachi, any surprises here with the latest move by the National Assembly Speaker to say under his leadership the perks will be back?
Well, as Speaker, he has to speak to the gallery, as it were. The gallery is intent, if you can hear the applause they're giving him when he talks about them becoming ATMs for the community. Really, this is... let me speak to Kenyans first before I speak to MPs. Number one, Kenyans must understand that the MPs want to keep you poor so they can buy you cheap. That's what it is. When he says you are the local ATM, you are the mortician, you are the midwife, you are all of those things, the only reason you are MP is all of those things is because you are poor. That's why. If you had your own resources, your MP would not need to be your ATM, because you would go to the nearest KCB ATM and you would withdraw your own money. The fact that he has to draw a salary on your behalf and therefore justify his salary is a misnomer. That's one. Number two, we need to explain to parliamentarians and to Kenyans that Parliament is not executive. It is not the role of Parliament to solve local problems. Let me be clear. It is not the role of the MP to bury your mother, your sister, your grandfather, your grandmother at any point. The problems that exist in our society that need to be solved by financing should be done so by the executive. This is the ruling that the courts gave the other day in scrapping CDF, in recognizing that if, and this is where the problem arises, Mark, if you give an MP oversight of CDF, he will not have oversight of government. Because, my friend, that is 100 million shillings upon which he can either decide to underpin his campaign or decide is going to be his personal wallet. And therefore, the matters of state, the matters he's actually employed to oversee, he will not, because he needs to spend a lot of time making sure Mama Shiro and Nyawera and Nyokafi and the rest get their CDF, because he's focused on that more than he's focused on making sure that he's superintending over the government of the day. And this is the problem. Okay. Now, when you combine this issue with the fact that it costs too much money to campaign in this country, let me tell you the truth. If Mark Bichachi, myself, spent 30 million shillings campaigning, and I have 5 years, you best believe I'll be looking at SRC with very bad eyes when they tell me they're reducing my sitting allowance. Why? Because if it cost me 30 million shillings, then I must at least make back 31 million, so that there is 1 million shillings extra. So how we've done our politics in this country, how we perceive the role of an MP, etc., is why we will always be here. So what are the solutions? Number one, Kenyans need to begin to fund the leaders they believe in, so that someone is not running on their own money. They're running off of the steam and the energy of the people who support them. This is the case in the United States. It's a case in many places. And what that does is it makes someone content with their salary because they did not invest. So
fund in what way? Like the remuneration to be...
No.
What do you mean?
I mean, when Mark Bichachi chooses to campaign,
yes,
and you believe in him, then you dig into your pocket and you get 1,000 shillings, 100 shillings, and you give me to go and represent you. So the campaign resources should come from the people who believe in the politician.
Bichachi, I'm a bit confused here. Are we in Kenya? Ama tuko kwingine?
No, but that's the point.
Because the makeup of the campaign season, at least, I'm not saying it's right by any measure, is that Mheshimiwa comes with something.
With money.
Yes. So that is quite a long shot to expect that it is the electorate who will fund the Mheshimiwa.
For as long as it is the Mheshimiwa who's coming with money, two things are guaranteed. Number one, that they will keep you poor. Because the moment you become rich, remember my first statement, they will keep you poor so that they can buy you cheap.
Right.
The day you become rich, the 200 bob will not be enough to make you vote for someone. Okay? So they will make sure you stay poor so that when they come with 200 shillings, you think they're Jesus. That's number one. But number two, it also means that the person who's willing to spend the most amount of money is going to win. And why do we find something interesting? There are 75 people with criminal cases. 75 people with criminal cases in the court today, in parliament today. Why? Because a criminal is the one who's most likely to give you money. Easy come, easy go. So at the end of the day, unless we fundamentally change how we vote for leaders, this situation that we have now will continue to obtain. And let me tell Kenyans to their faces, you get the leaders you deserve, because if I bought you, then you did not practice democracy.
Okay, that is just one of the solutions, funding the Waheshimiwas. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to this. No pressure to give any quotable quotes like Bichachi. MPs want to keep you poor so that they can buy you cheap. But this must go ahead in your response to this. The culture, whose fault is it that there's an expectation from Waheshimiwa to give me something, to at least support me when I'm burying my loved one, to at least give me kitu kidogo when he, over the weekend, comes around?
It's actually what Mark has painted very well, that politics in Kenya has become a very good business. Only in Kenya there are a gentleman right now who can't afford a cup of tea at a 5-star hotel across the road. He'll win an election, then after 6 months, probability of this politician owning a 5-star hotel is almost 100%. When these people get into office, during the campaigns they tell us they want to serve Amura. But as soon as they get into office, the first thing they do is to look at procurement. What is available? So that becomes their core business. Have you ever wondered that some of the richest people in Kenya are not businessmen? They're not people in the private sector. No, they are public servants, or people who've been in the public sector, or people who have connections. And retired President Kenyatta at some stage indicated as much. He said that some of the decisions taken at his office then, office of the president, they were influenced by vendors or procurement. That instead of coming up with a development agenda, which is moral-centric, it's vendor-centric. And I recall once you had the occasion of interviewing the president then you said, Mr. President, can you make public the SGR contracts? He told you he's going to make it public, but it's not public to date. Why? If SGR is indeed a project funded by the taxpayer, shouldn't the taxpayer look at that contract to establish what's in it here? What is the funding model? Yes. So I think politicians want to do that. And then secondly, a good people have become lazy because they know that you don't need to work hard. Yeah. If you're a local MP, if you lose somebody, your local MP is going to fund they're going to buy the coffin, they're going to pay for your school fees. So some people in good parts of Kenya, they wake up in the morning and they sit under a mango tree. If something happens, they call the local MP and they issue threats. They say, if you don't come for the funeral, we are not going to vote for you. If you don't give us a coffin, we are not going to vote for you. You remember an MP in Kakamega, when Dr. Muisa Kitui came back from his international role, he said, you want to vote for this man? He doesn't attend our funerals. He doesn't attend our weddings. So what business you are voting for him? Yeah. So in my view, we must go back and tell the voter that the role of the MP, as the speaker has indicated, is not to be an ATM. It's to create an environment where you have opportunities to shine. So that if you're a shoe shiner, you can actually shine your shoes to getting a mortgage. If you are a painter, you can paint to get a mortgage that you don't need to depend on these MPs. Okay. That's why Bichachi was talking about campaigns in other parts of the world, that if you want to run for the president of the US, you are Barack Obama and you are not a billionaire, all you need to do is to create a certain brand. People will align with the brand and they'll give you resources. Yep. However, on the flip side, the risk is if people are not giving you 10 bob or 50 bob, if they're giving you 10 million, 1 billion, then the moment you get into office, first of all, you must clear that political debt because there's no free lunch. If somebody gives you 100 million for your campaign, as soon as you are sworn in, as soon as you take the oath of office, they'll come to your office and they say, Sasa, kunaendaje?
Yes. Yeah, so, biashara.
Yeah, that is why we said that for all these political parties, there is a need for transparency. We need to know who is funding which political party, who is funding which politician. But again, the members of the National Assembly, in their wisdom, or maybe something else, the campaign financing regulations,
yes,
for some reason they come in late in the day when they're about to close, and then they're placed under the table. They're never
so
sorted
there was
out.
no cap. We weren't able to put a cap on the funding for the campaigns. Let me take a break at this point. Surely it can't all be bad for the members of parliament, or at least from the National Assembly or the Senate. So we can talk to some of the positives, but you had given us one solution, that is the electorate funding. Of course, Dismas has seen perhaps there may be a challenge there because there'll be expectation of a payback. But the other solutions as to getting around this issue of dependency from the electorate for the Mheshimiwa. Again, I'll repeat your quote. MPs want to keep you poor so that they can buy you cheap. No pressure to you, Dismas, but you can give me another quote for the next part of the discussion. Stay with AM Live. Welcome back to AM Live. We're talking about the move, or at least the pronouncement by the National Assembly Speaker on the first day of the induction for the members earlier in the week, that he will ensure that the perks that were enjoyed, the allowances that were enjoyed by the 12th Parliament, will be back for the 13th Parliament and at least National Assembly members. And this is something that will definitely get support. And you could even hear it when we played that story, Bichachi, that it will have support. And I mean, it's surprising how there's some things that unify all the, members of parliament, or, for those in the National Assembly. Much as at the moment there's a war of numbers and who is in control, but they certainly agree on the allowances coming back for them. Is this a populist move to align things politically by the National Assembly Speaker, or will it not sway the numbers?
It does touch the numbers. Why? Because already the fact that he is Speaker shows that the Azimio One Kenya Alliance did not vote as one, despite the fact that if you look at the numbers, and I have them here, let me just refer to them so that the viewers have a correct view, is that if you look at the numbers, the Azimio One Kenya Alliance clearly has a majority. ODM party has 73 MPs, Jubilee has 24, Wiper has 21, KANU has 5, DAP Kenya has 5, UPIA has 2, MDG has 1, and NOPEU has 1. That brings them to a total of UPA, UDM, PA, MCCP, KUP, 146. Kenya Kwanza, it comes to 134. So definitely a 12-man lead on the National Assembly. Now, this lead did not translate into election of the Speaker. So we must understand that the Speaker, being a Kenya Kwanza person, must also play to the gallery to make sure that the numbers swing towards Kenya Kwanza in terms of making decisions. Also, you must remember that our MPs are known to have weird habits. Moses Kuria once said that monies are given in the bathrooms of Parliament. You go there and you get an envelope. So if this is the kind of greed and malaise that is going to continue, then we are going to have the same conversations. But Kenyans must ask themselves, because we must contextualize what the issue is. Number one, the SRC is saying you are hired as a member of Parliament. Your job is to be in Parliament. The salary you are paid is to be in Parliament. And then you want to be given a sitting allowance to do what you are paid and chosen to do. It makes no sense. That's double payment. But the other thing that Kenya needs to understand is 1 billion shillings is what will be saved just by removing sitting allowances. 1 billion shillings, if we put it today, in terms of making sure that every burial that these MPs claim that they have to spend money on How many dignified burials would we have in this country if we gave 1 billion shillings into an insurance fund for every Kenyan who passes on? So there are solutions. So what is the second solution? The second solution is, instead of Parliament legislating for itself, let them legislate for Kenyans. Let them come up with clever strategies. If you are a midwife, where is the midwife bill? If you are the undertaker, where is the undertaker bill? If you are the person who's in charge of making sure that the hospital bill is paid, where is the doctor's bill? This is the kind of thinking we need from our parliamentarians. Right. We cannot have 3/4 of them having worked in Parliament in August of 2022, and in August of 2027, the Hansard does not record their name once because they said nothing. And that is the problem. They need to stop leading from their pockets and start leading from their minds. That's the problem. If we go that route, then we will also have more Otiende Amolos, more clever people in Parliament than people who box walls in Nairobi, and then we select them to be leaders.
So certainly there's clever members of Parliament, senators or National Assembly members, but it seems the numbers are less than there are more of what we need in the National Assembly and Senate. So, I mean, as we conclude this matter on the fight for allowances back, let me ask you this. They decide to bring it back. Is there anything the electorate can do but just watch and, you know, wish that, oh, I probably should have voted in someone else, or I should be in Parliament myself?
I think the only thing the voters can do when they pile these allowances, at least for this stage, is to yawn. So you can yawn for the next 5 years. You will do nothing else. But let's go for the best practice. Like in the US, if you're the serving member of the Congress or the upper house, Senate, you cannot come up with legislation to benefit for yourself. So like for the members of the National Assembly, the 13th Parliament, if they want to increase salaries, allowances, and everything else in aligned with the SRC, it must be for the 14th Parliament. But because they've got this power today, they can do anything as they deem fit. And my fear is that if the SRC is not aligned to their interest, the SRC leadership may find themselves back home. You remember at some stage when the Anti-Corruption Commission wanted to zoom into members of the National Assembly, the then CEO found himself at home. He was said that he was incompetent, that he didn't understand what he was doing. So they've got a lot of powers. But having said that, there is merit in rewarding our public servants well so that they deliver. Maybe what we need to do is to set up performance indicators that what do we expect you to do, so that we start ranking them. And on the basis of their performance for the next election, such kind of information is made public, highly publicized, so that if you have delivered in your 3 responsibilities, probability of winning the next election is extremely high. But unfortunately, even the president said to them that a number of you fight using all the resources in the world to go to the National Assembly and Senate. Then 5 years later, you have not spoken in that house. 5 years later, nobody is seeing fingerprints of your Mandela in your constituency. So why did you spend all these resources fighting? Because what one expects in the National Assembly and the Senate is having very serious cross-pollination of ideas, intellectual intercourse, so that you come up with ideas and take Kenya to the next level. So that we stop comparing ourselves with our neighbors and we start playing in the same league with UK, US, Singapore, and our peers. Yes. So there's a very valid expectation that if you come from, say, from around Lake Victoria, you will be pushing for legislation or motions so that you start exporting fish from Lake Victoria to the European markets. If you come from the northeastern or the arid areas like Wajir and Garissa, you know, that part of the world, that you'll be pushing for us to have irrigation. Have you ever wondered that a drought in Kenya can be predicted? Even by a kid who has not done CBC, you can predict when you're going to have these droughts. But how come it's always treated as an emergency? Yes. 10 years after devolution, it's still being treated as an emergency. Can you convince anybody that the governors from that part of the world, senators and members of the National Assembly, do not understand what irrigation is, or maybe they've never visited Israel to understand how
certainly
irrigation
we've
can
seen
be done.
benchmarking trips.
Yeah, but how come they've not converted that? How come they've not converted that?
Yeah.
Can you explain to a number of Kenyans why most counties that are next to Lake Victoria, that are next to the Indian Ocean, have no water? There's no water in the taps, that you have to keep on buying water. Can somebody explain that? So these are some of the things that we expect the leaders to zoom in.
Tell me this, gentlemen, as we close this issue on the perks and the fight to get back the allowances, is there anything the president, the leader of Kenya Kwanza, the leader of the government, who has run on a bottom-up approach, economic approach, is there anything that he can do, much as the electorate can't do anything about this if the National Assembly members of Parliament bring it back, that can he say something or do something to have them, calm down and not increase or reintroduce the allowances? And also, in the name of whether it is playing to the gallery, show Kenyans that indeed we are taking every measure, austerity measure, to ensure that we benefit the people and not ourselves. Is there anything? I'll start with you, Bichachi, and then...
There's a lot he can do. Number one, he can pivot to his campaign messaging, the bottom-up messaging about getting resources down to the people and making sure that the dynasties, the big boys who are in parliament today are not the beneficiaries, the sole beneficiaries of government. So yes, he can do that. And the problem is that there will be political ramifications for him. Remember, he's got a cabinet that he needs to get approved. He's got a host of changes that he needs to do, that he needs to get approved. But I think, will it be worth it? Yes, it will be worth it. Why would it be worth it? Because it will have the Kenyan people supporting him. Why? Because he will be walking his talk. And his talk was about making sure that the wealthy are not the beneficiaries of government solely, but rather we see more resources going to the people. This 1 billion shillings that is being saved by Parliament, if he can convince his own parliamentarians to say, you know what, this 1 billion shillings is going to go down, and make sure that in any county, in any constituency, we are not going to have issues of funerals and hospital bills and things like that. Because also, when the MPs are defending hospital bills, while the president is talking about NHIF and making universal healthcare something that is real for Kenyans, we cannot have our cake and eat it too. So MPs, my friend, some of us, if we earn 700,000 shillings, will be the richest people in our villages. So please be content. 700,000 shillings is not chump change.
Yes. Is, in your view, it is going to have a cost to him politically, but would it be worth it?
Well, I think now you've gone to the space of anthropology, that when you're discussing these issues, it's actually a societal expectation that this is what we expect our leaders to do. Back in the village, when you go to visit your local chief, you have a valid expectation that they'll give you a banana or chicken, or in other places, fish, or even a mango. But in my view, what we must look at, let's not look at the allowances in isolation. Let's give them allowances that reflect the expectations of Kenyans, but demand delivery. Pay them top dollar, but demand delivery. Part of the reasons why some of these organizations like KCB, Safaricom, they post huge profits is their CEOs are given top dollar, but the shareholders expect delivery. If you don't deliver, then you take a walk. Because it's practically impossible for an MP to go to the village today and tell people that mumeona kwa TV, sasa siku hizi hakuna pesa, so don't come seeking for anything. I think it needs to be a gradual process. However, the person now who has the highest capacity to inflict pain or pleasure to the members of the National Assembly and Senate is President Ruto. So in my view, we need to come up with a system, a nice system of reward. Let's give them allowances, which are not obscene, but let's demand service for the resources they are receiving. Unfortunately, we tend to vilify members of the National Assembly and Senate for allowances because for them it's very visible. Somebody did an account of allowances, and I think in the public sector, you have about 81 allowances. Yeah. There's airtime allowance, there's an allowance for everything. So if you're going to remove these allowances, let's remove them across the board. But do not just sacrifice members of the National Assembly and Senate because the allowances make people ticklish. All
right. Let's now move to the issue of who has the numbers, and Bichachi touched on it by giving us the numbers of majority, whether it's for Azimio, leaning to Azimio or Kenya Kwanza. And this is a story that was done early in the week as well by Kennedy Mureithi. The Kenya Kwanza alliance in the National Assembly will be pushing for the exclusion of members from 4 political parties now within the Azimio One Kenya coalition in the determination of who has majority in the House, arguing there is an ongoing case over their continued stay in the coalition. According to key figures within the Kenya Kwanza alliance in Parliament, the 4 parties, Maendeleo Chap Chap, the Movement for Democracy and Growth, the United Democratic Movement, and the Pamoja African Alliance, are in Azimio against their will. NTV's senior political affairs reporter filed this report. That is Kennedy Mureithi.
When the National Assembly resumes next week and the real work of Parliament starts, one of the hurdles the Speaker of the National Assembly will have to get over is the question of which political formation has the majority. According to the Azimio One Kenya coalition, they have 172 members, while their competitors in the government side, that is Kenya Kwanza, have around 165 members. Kenya Kwanza argues that cannot be the correct position, noting the recent events that have seen a number of political parties desert Azimio One Kenya, with their MPs asserting that should count for something. The United Democratic Movement has 7 MPs. The Maendeleo Chap Chap has 2 MPs. The Pamoja African Alliance has 3 MPs. And the Movement for Democracy and Growth has 1 MP.
If you look at the arithmetics after the elections and the people who have been gazetted and sworn in, we have the highest number of seats. Whether you look at it from the purview of individual political parties or even coalition of political parties.
I hear some people saying that now they're going to remove UDA and make it have UDA as a party, ODM as a party, WIPE as a party. That is not the spirit of the law. It's not even the letter of the law. The law is clear. It's a party or coalition of parties. Meaning, where you don't have coalition of parties, it will be a party. Where you have coalition of parties, then it is coalition of parties.
And Azimio One Kenya was then registered as a coalition political party. That Azimio coalition political party is not a parliamentary party because it doesn't have a single member of parliament.
There is the Azimio One Kenya coalition, which is both a political party and a coalition of party. And this has been allowed by our law. We amended the Political Parties Act to allow this to be in place.
A coalition agreement is subservient to a provision of the Constitution and more so in the Bill of Rights.
The Azimio One Kenya coalition is depending on the legal interpretation of the law, banking on Article 108 of the Constitution, which states there shall be a leader of the majority party and a leader of the minority party. The leader of the majority party shall be the person who is the leader in the National Assembly of the largest party or coalition of parties. The leader of the minority party shall be the person who is the leader of the National Assembly of the second largest party or coalition of parties. Kenya Kwanza, however, holds Azimio One Kenya is holding political parties hostage.
Azimio today says we signed a pre-election agreement with UDM, but the leader, Senator Ali Roba, has pretended they never signed anything. Chap chap, pa. They will tell you they were only shown under duress a dotted line of a one-page document to sign.
If they were coerced, there is a process to prove coercion, and that is the process they must follow. If they were just given the dotted line to sign, they must go to court and prove that that is the case. Then the court will pronounce itself that now they are legally and officially out of the coalition.
The Kenya Kwanza Alliance now wants the Speaker to set aside the 4 political parties, as there is a case in court challenging their continued stay in Azimio. This will affect about 13 MPs who the coalition is banking on.
Just like in marriage, where the 2 partners may have issues, before the divorce is finalized in court, it is still a marriage. You cannot enter into another marriage until the divorce that is in court has been finalized.
Where is there a dispute because Azimio Council, which was chaired by Uhuru Kenyatta, refused to exit parties that wanted to exit Azimio. And they refused to convene the meeting that they were supposed to convene to allow them to exit.
They signed the agreement that before 3 months before election and also 3 months after election. Now after 3 months after election, they can move, and that will be maybe end of November.
My friends and my good friend and my chair, Opiyo Wandayi, he should start internalizing himself that he's the leader of the minority coalition.
With both teams having advanced their arguments for and against the stance they are taking, the decision now rests on the Speaker.
It's not even for the Speaker to make a ruling. In fact, I would be shocked the Speaker would act rogue, in my view, if he attempted to define which side is a majority and which other side is minority.
Nothing has come before me yet, so I don't want to preempt any issue. When it does come, we'll give it a reasoned approach and communicate to the parties involved. I'm sure it's not a difficult thing to decide. When it comes, we look at the law, we look at the constitution, we look at the standing orders.
Kennedy Muredhi, NTV.
So that is the end, the last part of our discussion. That is the majority or the game of numbers within Parliament. What is at play here, gentlemen? Are we hoodwinking? Are they hoodwinking the Kenyans, hoodwinking themselves? Are they in touch with the reality? And I'm talking about Azimio, a coalition, as well as Kenya Kwanza. What is at play?
There are several variables. If you look at the theory, Azimio has got a majority in the National Assembly. If you look at the theory, Azimio has got a majority in the National Assembly. If you look at the theory, the Senate Speaker is an Azimio member, Honorable Amason Kingi, using their logic. But where the rubber meets the road, it's Kenya Kwanza. And they demonstrated that first by electing the two speakers, National Assembly as well as Senate. Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to the MPs right now, they're going through the induction process, and you tell them by a show of hands, can I see how many in Kenya Kwanza? The queue will be longer than the one for Azimio. So in my view, Azimio is merely clutching on straws. Okay. And as they try to internalize that, they must ask themselves, when you talk about Azimio, is it a coalition of parties or it's a coalition party? In which case, it doesn't even have an elected member anywhere. Maybe it's got only 2 members, Honorable Raila Odinga and Martha Karua. Then the other parties are standalone. So if you look at it from the Azimio perspective, I mean, if it's a coalition political party or a coalition of parties, they don't have the physical numbers. It's Kenya Kwanza. If you break it down, the party with the largest number is UDA. So in my view, what they must quickly do is to socialize with that unpalatable idea that they're going to be in the minority and ask themselves how they're going to make the sun, so how they're going to make hay while the sun is still shining. Mm. And the reason why Kenya Kwanza is very keen to ensure that they keep on reminding everybody about the numbers is that when you have those numbers, then you will chair almost all committees apart from pick and pack. You will be able to drive your agenda, because Dr. Ruto ran on this bottom-up agenda, and he needs to come up with so many pieces of legislation to implement that. Now, if you don't have the majority, then it's going to be a tall order, because every single day you'll be pleading with Opiyo Wandayi and company. And even if we stick to the theory, as soon as we get to the 9th of November, then the theory and practice will now merge. They will harmonize. So there's a chance that if Mr. Wetangula wants to look just on the theory, then the Azimio will be majority till around November. But as it is right now, there's an accounting concept called substance over form, which confirms the one fact that the majority in the National Assembly is Kenya Kwanza. So in my view, instead of Azimio clutching on straws, let them accept reality. They look at the numbers, and then they say, let's now become a loyal opposition. so that they can demonstrate that, in fact, there are government in waiting for 2027. Because right now, if you want to retain positions, say, on the basis of technicality, every single Kenyan can look at you and say, no, wait a minute, there's something amiss here. Because if Kenya Kwanza didn't have a majority, they wouldn't have elected those two speakers. And then finally, people know that during the formation of Azimio, a number of political parties and the politicians were forced to join Azimio under duress. That they were told, if you don't join this coalition, then you're going to see hell. So they moved not on their own motion, but now that there is freedom, they're saying, let's have a breath of fresh air. Let's have our freedom of association and speech. So they moved on the other side. They've decided to join Kenya Kwanza.
Okay.
So in my view, it will not be very complicated for Mr. Wetangula to take a decision. All right. Yeah, because, you know, as they say, the scoreboard doesn't lie. When you are in a soccer match, numbers don't lie.
Bichachi, why is this important to, at least define or distinguish whether it is for Parliament or even for the Mwananchi, that this is even a topic of discussion? Because in terms of what impact it has for legislation and implementation of policies, why does this matter, that who has a majority?
If Azimio today has majority, then they will have leadership of many of the parliamentary committees. Parliament conducts its business through committees. If you do not have the chairmanship of the committees, then your agenda becomes harder to push. But also, and more critically for Azimio, being the party that is not in government, having majority allows itself the opportunity to reward many more of its ranks with chairmanship of certain committees. So it is both about running parliament and therefore running government business in parliament, and it is also about the ability of Azimio to show up its numbers. Now, this issue is very clear in terms of law. In terms of the law, the parties that exist within the Azimio One Kenya Alliance are clear, and they are obviously in the majority. Now, in the minority is Kenya Kwanza. However, based on different signatures, different agreements, and different conflicts that are happening now, there are people who've moved in their hearts to Kenya Kwanza, but they've not moved legally from Azimio. To use the analogy of marriage, if you happened to die in between an argument between you and your spouse, then your spouse will remain to be next of kin. And this is the issue. So in my mind, the solution is very simple. On the record, Azimio is the majority party. Give them majority. If that record is to change, then let it change then. Why? Because in this country we have a tradition. When Jubilee was split in the middle, and there were people in UDA in spirit and in Jubilee on record, we continued as if Jubilee was intact. So let us not pretend that Kenya has not been in this situation before. In fact, the last 5 years, that's where we have been. So let us respect the letter of the law, respect Azimio's majority, and when and if the courts decide that Azimio has lost certain parties within its coalition and they've moved now to Kenya Kwanza, and Kenya Kwanza can demonstrate that they have overcome the 12-man majority, then let it change. I do not understand why we're acting as though it's a crisis. Right now, the law is clear. Azimio is leading. And the question of whether it is a party or a coalition of parties is that it's both. The law created an entity where you've got a coalition and a coalition of parties.
The question probably is there a gray area, as well as is it a fallacy that Azimio One Kenya coalition party does not have a member of parliament in the national?
You see, if you look at it in terms of what party is assigned to someone in parliament, you'd say Azimio does not have a single party. But then, by the same argument, you will say Kenya Kwanza does not have a single parliamentarian. Who is in Kenya Kwanza? In fact, at least in Azimio, the running mate and the candidate were in Azimio. In Kenya Kwanza, UDA is the one that hosted the party.
Dismas, you don't agree with this
we
point?
cannot have that argument one way and not the other.
Dismas.
Now, what Mark has said is the argument we must have, that Kenya Kwanza is a coalition of parties. And they are listed. There is a UDA, ANC, Ford Kenya. It's listed. Dr. Ruto ran as a UDA presidential candidate, not as a Kenya Kwanza candidate, but he's the head of the Kenya Kwanza coalition. While on the other hand, Raila Odinga ran as an Azimio la Umoja coalition party presidential candidate.
Yes.
There's no other person who ran for any elective office in the manner that Raila Odinga did. Others ran with their political parties.
Yes.
So that is going to be very easy. It's not going to be confusing. And the Honorable Dwala has raised a fundamental question. That is a coalition agreement superior to the Constitution, which gives you freedom of association, freedom of speech, and all these kind of things. But all said and done, you did ask a very important question. How does this affect morale back in the village? If Kenya Kwanza controls all those important committees, and more so the Budget and Appropriation Committee,
yes,
they will immediately run with their bottom-up agenda and start implementing their policies by allocating resources. But if this all-important Budget and Appropriations Committee is under the control of Azimio, then you're going to have an issue.
Okay.
And then also Mark Bichachi has spoken about rewarding people in the National Assembly. And in my view, it's not about, I hope Azimio is not fighting for majority status because they want to reward members of the National Assembly. We did not vote for MPs, either Kenya Kwanza or Azimio, to reward themselves. We want them to start addressing the cost of fertilizer, the cost of living in Kenya.
All right. We need to conclude. We only have 2 minutes for this. How long will this hold? That is, whatever we're calling the majority for either side for the period of this regime, because there are cases where the sponsoring party would say, if you've defected, then you should also, let go of your political position. How long will it hold as you conclude and as you conclude? Mark?
First and foremost, in this country, MPs defect, but never on paper. They defect in practice, they defect in rallies, but remain members of the party they are fighting. And that behavior will continue. It will continue because our MPs are used to a certain custom. So I don't see any MP losing his seat because of this particular movement. How long will it hold? Depends. And this is really the message for Azimio One Kenya Alliance. It really depends on whether Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka will continue to have a political agenda for this country. If they have an agenda, then Azimio has a chance to last. But if they do not have an agenda, then Azimio will struggle. But be sure, now that the Kenya Kwanza coalition is the one that is in power, let me tell you one thing. More than principles, our elected leaders love power. And where will they gravitate? To where power is.
Watu wanaoga wanarudi soko haraka sana. How long will it hold as you conclude?
There's not a single Kenyan, an elected member of the National Assembly who has ever lost their seat on account of defection.
Yes.
It's practically impossible. And in my view, the National Assembly and the Senate must have their acts in order quickly because there are acts of state capture ongoing in Kenya. There are so many financial transactions, your banks acquiring each other, mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers that they need to look at.
Yeah.
But more important, the cost of living. Yes. Because right now, Mura wants to see that somebody is lowering or reducing the cost of living and making Kenya competitive.
And right now, not Mora, but Olive Barrows wants to see us out of studio because it's her turn. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, and Mark Bichachi, political analyst. Thank you for your thoughts and time this morning. Let's give time and now the opportunity. Actually, your story that you did on Monday did set the tone for this conversation on the allowances coming back. And again, I'll go by Bichachi's quote, and I'm not paid for this. MPs want to keep you poor so that they can buy you cheap. He said that. Dismas said a lot of important things as well.
All right. And speaking of Dismas's Mora,
yes.
We're actually you know, you probably think, what, aren't we over COVID? But
Yes.
are you up to date with your vaccines?
Right.
And also, we'll be looking at a thyroid awareness.
I'm a bit worried by Bichachi. He's been sniffling all through there. So we're not over COVID.
Yeah,
I don't
you've
think.
been spraying me with things that cause allergies.
Thank you, gentlemen. Over to you, Olive.
All right, see you in the next couple of minutes on Your World.